The Bridge Podcast. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Sean Nixon.
And Jonathan Matthew.
Super special guest today, Courtenay Turner from the Courtenay Turner Podcast. How are you today?
Hey, I'm well, thanks. How are you guys doing?
Excellent. So excited to have you.
Excited to be here.
And like we were saying, first thing, everybody's going to follow you and listen to all your shows and like every single Instagram post and comment and send it to all your friends. And the reason is not only because you're awesome and your guests are awesome and your podcast is awesome, but our question is, how did you get to where you are today? And let's do the full Courtenay Turner life story, just because, not for people to cry about it or put you on a pedestal, but for inspiration.
I love it. I love it. I will do as much of a Cliff Notes version as I possibly can. But so I was born with congenital rubella. My mom had the germ measles during first trimester of pregnancy. That story alone is kind of crazy because my parents were not vaccinated. So, you know, that's pretty common in this country. The germ measles are not really a thing anymore because of the vaccine. My father was older and it wasn't around in his day, and my mom never got it. So my father actually socialized with my mom's OBGYN and was very good friends with him and the wife, and they used to play tennis together and socialize. And the wife came back from traveling, contracted the germ measles, and my father got sick. My father was very, very sick. He had like a fever of 104 for over a week, delirious. My father was not a huge fan of doctors, hospitals, kind of typical. Yeah, we all kind of get that. You know, I mean, some of them are wonderful. I don't want to, you know, say, but it's more the system.
The system.
Yeah. And yeah, because I definitely, doctors have helped me tremendously.
Oh, yeah.
Some doctors are absolutely wonderful. And needed. But yeah, so he didn't go. My mother, about 10 days later, found a rash on her upper chest. She didn't have nearly the same kind of symptoms, but she was convinced that she probably had contracted it in just a much more mild form. So she starts doing all this research, and they can't test whether or not you have it, but they can test the titer to see if the baby's been affected, to see if, you know, I had antibodies. So they read the titer incorrectly. They read it as being 112. It was really 121, but the doctor was dyslexic. So
that's a big deal. Jeez.
It was a very big deal because if the doctor had read it correctly, they would have advised my mom to have an abortion.
Whoa, double big deal.
That's like a whoa.
There's like 10 side roads we can go off of why that's a bad idea.
Right?
3 multiverses that could happen here.
But
right?
then if you want to talk about like the divine plan and all this other stuff,
yeah, wow.
If he reads that right, then you're not here now. Oh my goodness.
Whoa.
So reading it wrong was the right thing to do.
Even though probably didn't see it obviously for a while, right?
Wow.
Well, I always say, like, I feel very strongly, you know, I'm very spiritual. I very much believe my spirit wanted to be here. Like, yes. From conception, I was fighting to be here. There was some, you know, my spirit felt called to be here and,
yep.
you know, have a mission. So yep. I very much feel connected to that sense of purpose. But yeah, so I was born on Super Bowl Sunday in the middle of a blizzard, and my father was a huge football fan. I, not so much. Maybe some of my circumstances around birth contributed to that. I don't know. But my dad wanted to watch the game, and I was not arriving conveniently. I have since then not really learned punctuality. It's never been my forte. But I was not arriving conveniently on time. And so they tried to induce labor so that my dad could watch the game, but not, you know, he didn't want to watch by himself. He wants his friend, the doctor, to watch with him. So they tried to induce labor. And as they gave my mom the epidural, I started to crown. So my mom was tied up with a spinal headache for the first 2 weeks of my life. And so she couldn't like lift me, hold me. She couldn't lift her head. She was in a lot of discomfort and pain. And when she finally could, she noticed that one eye was rolling up in the top of my head. And she kept asking them to do all these tests. And the hospital was covering up the doctor. They knew the doctor was dyslexic and that he had made a mistake. And so they were covering up. They kept saying all the tests were normal when they weren't. They were, saying things were elevated when they should have been normal, reversed. They were basically lying. I won't go into all the tests, but you can spare you all those details. But they were covering up, and they kept saying, but my mom was very concerned about my eye. She was like, that doesn't make sense. And they kept telling her, baby's eyes don't focus. And she said, well, that doesn't make sense. One eye is, so why is the other eye not focusing? So my paternal grandfather had cataracts, and my mom kept saying, it looks a lot like my dad's eye. That one eye looked like that. And so she finally found a doctor. My mom is very persistent. And I think that's one of the things I do get from her. I got a lot of great things from her. I love my mom. She's awesome. But I think I definitely got that from her, resiliency and persistence. And she kept going around to different doctors trying to figure out what was wrong, particularly with my eye. And she finally found a doctor who said, yes, it is a cataract and we need to remove it. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of it, there's a lot wrong with the eye. It's a microphthalmic eye, which means that it's a smaller eye. There's, I didn't have a lens. There were a lot of, it wasn't a normal eye in any capacity. So they removed the cataract. I was 3 months old. But cataract surgery back then was very different than it is today. Today, it's kind of a routine procedure, and it's really not a big deal for most people, fortunately. But that was not the case for me. They pulled the iris and they left debris behind my retina. They had to go back and do what's called a retinal cleanup. And when they did that, they confirmed that there was rubella pigmentation on my sighted eye, on the retina behind my sighted eye. So they confirmed that it most likely was congenital rubella. And so there was a whole bunch of other complications that came with that. I learned how to speak by reading lips. But when I was about 6 years old, I got hearing aids. I was diagnosed with a very significant hearing loss. That story was kind of funny as well. I had heart surgery when I was a year old. I was born with hypotonic limbs, so the muscles in my limbs didn't develop. My growth was stunted. I had fine and graphic motor impairment. I was missing 10 teeth. They basically told my mom that the best she could hope, once they did confirm, was to find a nice institution for me to spend my life. And fortunately, my mom said, I don't think that's right.
So, yeah, good for mom. And just, there's like so much more of this story to go, but just for the audience, I've seen Courtney climbing to the top of the rope, snatches, all kind of stuff. So clearly there's a happy ending to this, and everybody's excuses for why they're not doing certain things are already out the window already.
Just,
Thank you.
Not even a year old, and there are already excuses.
This is wild.
That's insane. Wow.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So, there, so in the beginning, it was we were kind of figuring out what was going to be, so obviously there's a long trajectory from then that was birth to now, we're a few decades later, so, but I think one of the kind of pivotal moments in really knowing that I was going to be okay was there weren't many rubella clinics left, because I was born in that weird time. It was kind of before a lot of the medical advancements in technology, and after, the vaccines, there just really wasn't a whole lot of a need for it. But we found one. It was the rubella clinic. It was a Roosevelt Institute in New York City. And they had told my mom that I was going to be fine. And she said, why? And they were very, very convinced. And they said, because I did a lot of mimicking. That's how I learned how to speak. I would mimic, I would watch, I'd read lips, and I would watch the hand gestures. And I did a lot of that in my interaction. And the doctors kept thinking that that was an indication that I was autistic or retarded, clinically speaking.
Yeah.
Or, there was some sort of a behavioral cognitive issue and concern. And they said, no, this is her way of coping. It's her imagination. And she's a very vivid, strong imagination. And that's going to save her. So yeah, I used to create like my own world. I created something called Bubble Land, which one day I'm going to make a comic series about.
Yes.
How about a theme park? Let's do that.
Yeah, that's
What?
amazing.
So how about a theme park? Bubble Land. That's
Yeah. Oh, sure. Let's do a theme park. Why not?
That's hilarious. We'll sell them.
Yeah. And
I like that already because it's like more right brain activation, where it's like the left linear thinking doctors were like, well, the spreadsheet says she's done for and she's never going to live a good life. But
right.
this other clinic was like, okay, but she still has her creative side and her imagination is good. And that's where healing comes from, as far as like if you have heard of any Joe Dispenza's work where you tap into your meditative creative side and you can heal anything.
Yes.
Because it doesn't seem to make sense. So if you stay on a linear path, you won't get anywhere.
Yeah.
But if you get creative and imaginative and get into that right brain side, you can heal anyone.
And it was also a way of coping for me because, like, for instance, with Bubble Land, I didn't fit into the, quote unquote, normal mainstream world. I couldn't communicate the same way. I wasn't hearing and seeing the same way. I wore a patch over my sighted eye every other day of my childhood. I didn't have hearing aids, so I was almost 6. So I was essentially blind and deaf every other day of my childhood. So that's very isolating. It's a lot of obstacles that most people don't face, So I knew that I think I had enough wherewithal to, whether it was conscious or not, but I think it was pretty conscious to know that I was not immersed in the human interaction the same way that, other people may have been. And so creating Bubble Land and doing these, mimicking others was my way of bridging that gap. It was the way of, if I was being excluded, whether intentionally or just by nature of the circumstance from the world around me, it was a way of drawing people into my world, creating my own world for them to come into. And that was really my coping mechanism. So,
I love that.
Wow. Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Do you have do you have an earliest memory of that? Like, I know yours is like 10. I have one from like 3. Do you remember the difference from that, like, vividly? Or
of Bubble Land, or just of those?
Yeah,
I have really early memories. I mean, I have,
wow.
Maybe 2-3 years old. I have
Wow.
memories. Yeah,
Wow.
definitely 3, 4. Like, I have vivid memories.
Wow.
And I always had very young. Well, I think I told you the story about Mrs. Corey. I was 2.
Yeah, you were 2, and you remembered a lot
Yeah.
of it. That's very weird to me, because I don't remember anything before the age of like 10 or 12, probably just from like childhood trauma stuff and abuse and whatnot. Maybe it's blocked out, but I can't remember nothing. But,
a lot. That's a little bit late, but for my memories that early are very uncommon.
Are super early, right?
Yeah, that it's not, most people don't have like memories that young. But I really did. I think so much of, because it was such a formative time for me, and I think, I mean, maybe it's just because it's who I am, but I think there was so much of trying to process that, where I originated to my growth, did the development. So I think, and there was also just a lot of changes in terms of family and socially and those dynamics that occurred, that as much, this sounds strange, but as many struggles and as difficult in many ways as that those early years were for me, I actually have a lot of really fond memories. I mean, my mom was super, super supportive and helpful. And, there was, she always used to say, it's you and me against the world. And there was something really special about that bond, and my grandfather as well. So I think there were a lot of, and I had a lot of really great friends as a very young kid. So
that's great.
I think there was something about that I wanted to hold on to. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to give Mom a lot of credit here, because when you get that us versus the world mentality and support from your mom saying you can accomplish anything, specifically, and you said like those formidable, impressionable years before 7, where you're just soaking up everything and you're going to believe, like, if mom believed the first doctor and said you were done for and told you you were done for, you would have believed that too. But mom said, forget that shit. We're going for it. That's
or
amazing.
whether I believed it or not, there wouldn't have been the same room for possibility, because what are you striving towards? Right. So even if the child believes intrinsically, because I think we all have, especially as kids, we have very much have a can-do mindset. We want, because we're soaking up everything. So it's all about what is possible. We're just learning what's possible. So we're trying to discover, and we're in the realm of exploration and discovery. So I think, but the problem is that even if the child has that mentality, if they're being shut down, they're literally being denied that opportunity to explore and to discover. And so, we all have, I'm not one of those people who thinks literally anything is possible. I'm a very optimistic person, and I think we're capable of so much more than we often think. But I'm not one of those who's like, yeah, I mean, if you want to fly, you can just jump out the window and you'll fly, I mean, it sounds like an absurd example, but I do believe human beings have limitations. We all have gifts, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. We are limited, we're finite. But I think that when you're denied the opportunity to explore and to discover, then you don't necessarily reach the full potential that you may achieve. So
for sure. So where are we at? Where are we at in the physical, like rehab or growth here? When did you start working out and get more? Because we're still rehabbing the eye and putting the patch so the other eye will strengthen. Yeah. We got hearing aids and we're mimicking. And then I'm also thinking, like, imagine how hard it is to read lips when you can barely see. Like, that's wild in and of itself. Yeah. But what about, take us to like maybe middle school, high school? Like, when did exercise and other things start?
Right. I'm very impressed. You really are an empath that you were able to really get all of that. I think a lot of people don't. It's so hard a lot of people haven't dealt with what I've dealt with, so it's very hard for people to really understand what that all encompasses. And you really did get that. So I appreciate that. And that's, really a testament to your sense of empathy. But yeah, so from a very young age, they put the patch on me every other day of my childhood, and I would have to do 2 hours a day of eye exercises. And some of those were like light bright. I don't know if you do remember light bright. Yeah. So and that was super, super frustrating to me. Imagine trying to find like a little hole, when you can barely see. I had a little bit of vision in my left eye at that, at a young age. They never worked together because the discrepancy was so great. At this point, I really don't. I have light vision out of the periphery. I can tell you if the light's on or off. That's about all I see out of my left eye now. But back then, I could see a little bit more. And so they're really trying to strengthen it, see if they could, especially to get the strabismus. I had several surgeries for that, but they also were trying to strengthen the muscles. So I was doing all these, like, playing with these block sets, which I actually loved. Those were like blocks and puzzles. And that was something I really, really enjoyed. And I would do that with the patch. But then this was really fascinating is my mom came up with this idea and my grandfather built it. And it was essentially a balance beam. So they would make this, plank that I would have to walk on every day. So every other day I was blind and deaf walking on it, essentially. And then the other days I could see, I didn't have the hearing aids yet, but I could see. And at the end of the week, if I completed it successfully, they would make it narrower. That was my reward.
Yes. That's the progression.
Yeah. So that really helped to strengthen my kinesphere, my sense of proprioception. Yeah. And they also did these when I was like really little and they discovered the hypotonia, I couldn't like turn over. It was mostly affecting my limbs. But I had a baby nurse who was from one of the British Islands, and she said, why don't we put her in a wet sandbox? I guess it was an old school, like, occupational therapy technique. And she said, I can see she has a really determined personality. I think if we put some toys that are just slightly out of reach, she'll reach for them. And the sand would create resistance, to hopefully stimulate the neuromuscular coordination and then lead to hypertrophy. And it worked. So we're very, very grateful to her, Alice. But with the beam, when I was about 4, I went to day camp, and I actually remember this, walking into the gymnasium, and I saw the balance beams like across the gymnasium, and I ran over to them. I was like, it was familiar, it reminded me of the thing that my grandfather had built. And so I really fell in love with gymnastics from a pretty early age.
That's amazing. Wow. I love that. Your brain was like, I know what that is.
That's my
That's my shit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
and I have a really interesting story about the balance beam too. I wrote a short film about it like years ago when I was in college, but it was when I was maybe like, I think it was about 9 or somewhere around that age. And I saw like all the big kids, they were on the high beam doing these back walkovers. And I had learned to back walkover, so I really wanted to do the back walkovers on the beam. And my coach told me that I could never do it because she said, with your hearing, like, you'll always be off balance, and because you don't have motion parallax, you're never going to land in a straight line. And so it's just too dangerous. We can't have you do that. And so I, of course, you tell me I can't do something, and then I'm like, I want to do it.
See a theme here.
So they had like these, the lines that outline the mat. And so I would practice on the floor, just trying to land the straight line over and over and over again. And then I went up to like the low beam that had like mats around it, practice. They had intermediaries, like, the beam, like before you get to the high beam. And so I would keep practicing, put like, crash mats next to me. And then finally I got it, and I was super excited. And so I called my coach over, and I was like, I have to show you something. And she said, okay, come into my office. And then I was super scared. And I thought I was going to get in so much trouble because I defied her, And she said, so you can have, and she shows me like this t-shirt, and then she said, and she points to the jacket, and it was a team jacket. And I said, well, if I pick that, does that mean that I'm on the team? And she said, yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Oh my God, that's so
sick
story.
Yeah, I knew there was going to be so many
like
big stories.
30 for 30 already. You're not even out of college.
This is amazing. And that just shows what we always talk about. Like, if you have belief and then repetitions. So it's not just the sit there and pray for it or meditate for it. That's part of it, and visualization and belief in yourself and positive affirmations and all that. But then you put in the work, right? The physical repetitions over and over.
Yeah.
Wow. And I love how you've already talked about just relating everything back to fitness, scaling it up. You start on the ground, and then a little higher, and then a little higher, and a little higher. Progressive overload as you go. That's amazing. How old were you for that story?
You're
still pretty young.
Somewhere around like 8, 9, somewhere around that age. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I remember, because most of the girls on the, the big girls were like 11, 12, it was like, yeah.
And the next best thing about that story was you earned it.
Yes.
You weren't the little girl in the wheelchair that they gave you the free jacket.
Right.
Which is cool too for some people's story or whatever. But for this story, you earned it.
Yeah. And so that's a huge, I have a show, it's called Wim, What is Movement? My premise is that all human beings are designed to move. The ways in which we do are our unique creative expression. And I believe movement has the power to heal emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And the reason for that is because I think of movement as a metaphor for life. So I don't need to wax poetic about, all the benefits of movement for our physical and mental well-being. I mean, we now have studies to show one of the strongest, ways to mitigate against cognitive decline is actually physical exercise. And that's amazing. That's something we can all access in some degree, within the realm of whatever our limitations may be. But that's just such a gift that we have that. And we know how, much it does for our emotional well-being. I can tell you there are times in my life where it was literally the thing that saved me, where I was in really emotionally, not ideal places. And my movement practices were better than any SSRI could have been. They were really just that powerful for me. But I think what a lot of people don't always recognize or harness is the philosophical and personal development aspects of movement. It's very tangible. So you see your progress. And, it's great to see the aesthetic results. And, I am certainly not one of those people who ever would shame somebody for having aesthetic goals. But what I've realized is most people don't stay in it for that. That's great. That's a added bonus,
Well, I was going to say, you look amazing, but that's a byproduct. That wasn't your first goal.
Yeah, it's just because the reality is that not that, I don't think that those are worthwhile goals to have, but they're fleeting and they're ephemeral and they're
more short term,
transitory, they change. So, as you go through life and as you go through different experiences and your body is always physically changing. So I think but what people gain from realizing what they're capable of doing, how empowering that is, and what they realize from dealing with the physical challenges that they're faced with. Like, how do you handle, and not just the challenges, because we all have things that come easier to us too, right? Like, I think that was one of the things I didn't necessarily even realize when I started CrossFit, but everybody would kind of, tease me when it was a body weight day. I don't know how familiar you are with CrossFit, but when it was, like a Cindy Watt or like a, Zachary Tellier, like one of these body weight workouts. And they were like, oh, Courtney's here to crush this, and I never really thought about it. And I was like, yeah, actually, those are my thing. Like, I love them. I tend to do better at them. They come more naturally. I mean, not that I don't have to work hard and push myself, but, they're easier for me than some of the other workouts, so sure. Everybody has those. But how do you handle that too? Like, do you coast? Do you, right? And I think that teaches you so much about yourself and about how you navigate life. And you can use those lessons for some of the things that are less tangible in life. So
yeah, that's amazing. It's literally everything we talk about.
It's really well said.
That's crazy because we didn't even talk in depth about fitness until now, like off.
I know.
Friendship off the camera. Everything that you've said is exactly everything that we talk about. Where physical movement and physical fitness is super important, but it's just a metaphor for the deeper stuff.
Yeah, it's like the perfect. It's such a, like you said, tangible medium. Like you can feel feedback. Where it's like, I have to meditate maybe a couple of weeks, who knows how long, to get like, oh, I feel the meditation's working. But like I exercise, like I know I did work and I can feel it in my body, and I know what the tangible, the numerical, stipulations are around my weight and stuff like that, or what I got to do for that. And then also, like I know, like especially when you're younger, you go into a lot of people with the aesthetic goals. You get in there for like, I don't really like what I am right now, so I want to change. And then like once you kind of like move beyond it, like, oh, okay, that was a cool goal, but this is I just like being able to improve myself and empower myself. And like, I'm a fucking badass.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your eyes look great now, by the way. I don't know if that still messes with you mentally or whatever. They're very pretty and they move really well. I don't know if that's just how it is or you did so much rehab. But I hope that still doesn't bother you.
I do really appreciate that. So I will tell the story. I have not shared it all that often. I think I've done it once before. So I had many surgeries on the eye.
Yeah.
Some of them were I developed glaucoma. I've had 5 procedures for the glaucoma alone. I still take drops for the glaucoma. I've had strabismus, which is for the eye muscles to help them focus. I have had ptosis. I had 4 ptosis surgeries, which is to lift the lid because the lid was so closed that it was almost like my eye wouldn't open. I've had many. Those didn't really work too well. It would keep drooping. But I had oculoplasty surgery, which, reshaped the lid, and lifted the skin. to try and make them more symmetrical. The orbital structure is different. I have asymmetric bone development. So the left eye is actually smaller in every way. The eye itself is smaller. Since I was a very young kid, I would work with a artist who would take pictures of my eye and we would design a cosmetic lens. I never wore like I don't have a glass eye. There is, the eye there because I want to keep the optic nerve alive, because hopefully one day they will come out with some sort of stem therapy for optic nerve regeneration and stimulate whatever they can. I do believe those kind of miracles can exist, and
absolutely,
hopefully with what they're doing with medicine that they can use it for some great miracles, and maybe I can be one of the beneficiaries, which would be awesome. But I did, because the iris was pulled, and because it's a small eye, I had been working with this, to wear the contact lens for years. And then when I was, I think, a junior in high school, we found like colored lenses. Those were very trendy at the time. And I had played around with those for a little bit. And we actually found ones that looked pretty symmetrical. So I would wear it on both eyes. But when I moved out here, I still wore them. I wear like the gray ones look the most natural, which is interesting. My sister has green gray eyes. My grandfather had gray eyes. So, and I think even my brown eyes have some gray in them. The left eye was smaller, but was also a different color. It was like a greenish blue. So like a hazily, the mix of colors, but, and so I would wear those, but I was driving a lot here. I lived in New York before I moved here. I lived in New York City and really didn't drive. And so it was very uncomfortable for me, because driving out here is very different than driving even in New Jersey. New Jersey, not like weaving in and out of lanes, and it's different. And you don't have 6 lanes on a road. And so it was limiting my peripheral vision in my sighted eye. So we had explored, there was it was not even FDA approved. I was in the clinical trials to get an iris implant put into my eye. And the hope was that it would make the size match and the color. It was not the result that I had hoped to achieve. There was a slight hope, like we were pretty aware that this was most likely going to be a cosmetic procedure, but we had hoped there was a chance that maybe by having a artificial iris, that there was some visual benefits that could be ascertained. But it was a clinical trial, and because there's so much else going on with the eye, we weren't really very sure of that. But I was willing to take the risk. And long story short, or not so short rather, but that was what we did do that. And they had to, it was something like a 6-hour procedure, because he had to keep cutting. It's a silicone piece, and he had to keep cutting it because it's a microphthalmic eye. You can't put a normal size iris into a small eye. And I don't know why none of us realized that, but so they had to make it smaller. I don't actually regret it, because it does match more. The colors are much closer. And now what I'm able to do is I work with an artist to make just a rim around the contact. So I still have a smaller eye, the colors match more, but I make a rim that is a bunch of different colors to make the sizes match.
Well, I think they look great. And I like how you also
very long-winded, but yeah, thank you. But yeah, the process of all of that is like, it's been my kind of lifelong, and it is like my armor. I mean, a lot of women are like, with their hair, their makeup, and like I have all that, but my contact is like very few people ever see me without my contact.
So. Yeah, but I think they look great. And I love how you said there was no regrets in any of those stories, because they're all learning lessons that we had to go through, and your adversity makes you who you are. Yeah. So I'm very proud of myself. I didn't cry once during the gymnastics story.
I looked over and I saw you.
I kept it together.
I saw a little water.
But we were still, I'm proud of myself. But you were only like 8 there. Take us to middle school and high school. I know there's more. I know there's so much more.
No, there's.
We haven't even gotten to the like Mean Girls, puberty. Like there's craziness about to come. I know.
Well, all right. So So nursery school, I would say I peaked in nursery school. It was kind of my heyday.
For all that says she's achieved sitting here right now, and I think we're saying that. That's hilarious.
I always say this. I had like, this great circle of friends. And I think at that age, kids just don't necessarily, they're very accepting. They're
less judgment.
They just go along with things. And so I had great friends, and a great social life, in nursery school. And, even just, I was very stimulated in every kind of capacity, so I really enjoyed that. But then we switched me into a public school in first grade, and the kids were really, really mean. I used to get into like physical fights, and it was very, very challenging. And I think all kids go through, that kind of experience, but I don't think I'm unique in having experienced being bullied or left out or ostracized, but it was definitely a really difficult time. And I left. I had applied for a bunch of private schools to leave, and I would score 99 or 98 percentile on all of their tests, and they wouldn't take me because I was quote unquote disabled. And so they were concerned that they wouldn't be able to accommodate me. I wouldn't be able to.
Jokes on them.
There's just a wake of people eating their words already. We're not even.
It's got a list.
Oh my God.
Wow.
So we found a school. It was a Montessori style school,
awesome.
Very, very small. But and again, no regrets. We're here today, but it was interesting because by, I think it was October of third grade, that school only went up to sixth grade. And so by October, I had finished the sixth grade math textbook. They had nothing for me to do. They told me to go into the library and read. It was a very small school, so it's not like there was that much, but I read all the books in the library by January. They literally had nothing for me to do. They were like, okay,
you want a job here?
Right. So I started writing like a book, and it was, very much a book about how mean the kids were. Just like, elementary school trials. I'm sure it wasn't very interesting to anybody, but so then I went back into public school in sixth grade, and then I was really behind because I hadn't done math in 3 years, and I caught up pretty quickly, but instead of advancing me, they had me tutor the other kids in that class, which was really silly. They really should have jumped me up. But and it's like from fitness, it's about repetition, right? And math is very much about repetition. So, that definitely was not the best strategy, I don't think. I think people should be constantly stimulated, and met at their level. But it was socially really, really challenging for me. Those years were really, really hard. I don't know. High school was I don't know how much you want me to go into, really. So we can go through the trajectory, but I can just say that I think that I threw myself into a lot of personal kind of academic research in high school because I struggled so much with a lot of the social end of things. And I was really fortunate that my high school kind of let me carve out a lot of really unique academic experiences. I had started something called they had a focus research project for seniors to do. So it was very similar to like a dissertation where you do a review of literature your first semester, and then you do field work second semester, and the seniors were allowed to drop classes in order to do this research. I had, I think it was after going into my sophomore year, it was right after my sophomore year. I wasn't going to, no, sorry, it was right before my sophomore year. I wasn't going back to camp. And so I didn't know what to do for the summer. I was going to be bored. So I had signed up for a chemistry course, and I wanted to. My mom suggested I do some research. My mom's a psychologist, and I was trying to think of a topic. And one day we decided, I was always fascinated by dreams, and I would always ask her to analyze my dreams with me. And so we were like, she was like, why don't you do that? And so I started to think about, a research project I could do around dreams and dream analysis. When I realized how much work it was going to be, I presented it to the principal of my school and asked if I could get some sort of credit, like I was getting credit for chemistry. And he said, well, no, because you would have to have somebody from the school supervise, even though I was going to be working with the clinical licensed psychologist, they needed to have somebody supervise. I said, okay. And he said, but you could do it for your senior focus project. I was like, well, that's a while away. I don't want to start this now and then, pick it up in a few years. That's odd. So we came up with this idea to do a 2-year research project. So I did a 2-year focus project on dream analysis. My mentor was the founder of the Association for the Study of Dreams. My school actually published it. I got permission as a junior. I couldn't drop classes, but I could go out to San Francisco and be certified in my mentor's method of analysis. It was called the interview method, and train with her. And so I had great, I also created an independent study in philosophy in high school. So I had a lot of very interesting academic experiences in high school. And I'm really grateful for those because that was kind of where I was able to immerse myself. And I was still, I competed gymnastics. I still was involved in those things. And yeah. And I don't know where we can go from there.
That's amazing. We're teenagers still. There's so much more. And I love how you're looking back on all of it with gratitude because everything had to happen for those stories to unfold and for us to be here today.
Right.
So is there nice college stories or should we skip to career and adulthood?
Yeah, we can, in terms of academically, the only thing that was kind of interesting with college was that, so I started the junior research project, and the project I actually wanted to do was it was a human brain study. So I presented it to Columbia Presbyterian. I asked, I wanted them to oversee it and to help me conduct it. I would need MDs and PhDs to actually do the study itself, and I would oversee the research. And they pretty much laughed in my face. They told me I need an MD PhD to conduct the study. It was a human brain study. They were not going to have a 16-year-old kid do the study. So I said, which in hindsight was actually kind of silly to me, really, because it's not like I'd be the one sticking needles in people's brains. It's like you can be a CEO of a company, of a software company, and not code software, right?
Exactly.
So it actually, in hindsight, I realized this was actually kind of silly, but that was, I didn't know that back then, and I certainly was not in the position to argue. So I didn't. But they told me that if you did do it, there was the high likelihood that it would be statistically significant, and you would get a Nobel Prize. And I said, well, that's what I'm going to do then. So I started college, right? Obviously. That's really simple, right? So
I love it.
Yeah.
So I started college as a neuroscience major with the intention of going down that path. And I really fell in love with philosophy and realized that I had very little science background except for what I had taught myself mostly. So
what university?
I went to Hamilton College. It's a very small school upstate New York. And my dad had also, it was not the best school for me, to be really honest. I think my dad had all sorts of restrictions on where I could apply. I wasn't allowed to apply to an Ivy. I couldn't go to a major city. I couldn't be too far from home. That was for my mom. I couldn't go anywhere that was too liberal.
Well, I'm not a guy that likes any rules, but I like all of those rules. Where exactly were you in New York?
I couldn't go anywhere that was too big. Yeah, my dad was great, but it was really funny when I was looking at schools. The first school he took me to look at was Oberlin, and I don't know if you're familiar with Oberlin, but there was a lot of people with multicolored hair. We'll just put it that way. And yeah, and I mean that's my remembrance,
Yeah, which doesn't make them bad people, but clearly we know the type that they're either confused or indoctrinated or something.
I mean, there are some people who are awesome with multicolored.
100%.
It was a disproportionate population of the school had, and so we leave and my dad's like, so do you understand why you don't want to go to like a super liberal school? Dad, I think you picked like the most extreme example. He's like, that's my point. He's like,
prove a point. Yes, I like this guy.
I love how you phrased the question.
Yeah.
Why you don't like it?
So so that was kind of my I had to pick kind of a compromise between all of those things, and that was a compromise. Sense. In hindsight, my dad was absolutely right.
Of course.
I should have, of course. he kept saying I should go to Hillsdale. I probably would have really preferred that. In hindsight, it would have been a better place for me, but
okay, so Hamilton College, I cut you off. You were going to win the Nobel Prize. I'm ready.
Right, but I switched into philosophy. I had done an independent study in undergrad, in high school, in philosophy. I had written several I wrote in ninth grade, I did a paper on pre-Socratic philosophers and their search for primordial transcendence. And then in my one of my favorite papers ever. And then my sophomore year for English, I did one on like the trial of Socrates. The teacher who I wrote for the term paper for the previous year used it and published it as a secondary source for all of his students.
That's amazing.
So I remember I would be like walking down the hall and there were students that would come up to me and they'd be like, are you Courtenay Turner? Like, yeah, why? And they're like, well, I just quoted you.
Let's go.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So I had a real passion for philosophy. I mean, it was from a very young age. I was really
I was going to ask a side question before we get, because we're going Nobel Prize. I got like 3 things going on. Yeah. My question after the life story was going to be, you mentioned earlier about spirituality. And I was going to ask if that was a self-discovery or because of life experiences or because of religion and you swung a different way. But maybe I'm picking up now that it comes from your love of philosophy and asking these questions.
It came from when I was 9 years old, my grandfather passed, and my grandfather was very much like a father to me.
Sure.
My own father was wonderful, but there was kind of periods where he had a hard time kind of being close due to a lot of my challenges. And, for whatever reason, that was difficult for him to connect to me. As I got older, he was certainly there. But so my grandfather was very much my rock during my early years. And we were very, very close. And when he passed, I was faced with a lot of questions about religion and mortality, afterlife. And I was really always fascinated by just the questions of the here and now and the metaphysics.
Why are we here?
Why are we here? Yeah, I was the why kid. My mom got me when I was like 3 years old. She got me the Snoopy answers to the why questions, and I made her read the astronomy ones like every night. I was always really fascinated by that. And so I kind of came up with, I didn't grow up with much religion. My family is Jewish, and the funeral was a Jewish funeral, but we really didn't have a strong religious basis. And so I didn't have that knowledge base, but it didn't necessarily resonate for me. My father was a staunch atheist. And I'm definitely much more spiritual than he was. But I kind of had to really, formulate what made sense to me.
Figure it out on your own. That's how you know it's authentic. Because it's not somebody saying, here's all the answers in the book. Because even if you stuck to any one of those books, commercialized religion, you'd still be like, okay, but why? But that doesn't make sense. Like, that's what I always did too.
Yeah, well, and
I like your story here, but there's a lot of plot holes.
You're like, but wait, how do you fill in all these gaps? And what's really interesting that I've learned since then, actually, about Judaism is that the whole premise of Judaism is to question. That's actually the whole process is about questioning authority, questioning the structure, even questioning, God. Like, it's always the process of questioning. That is one of the fundamental tenets of Judaism, which I didn't know.
I like it.
But I found it fascinating. I was like, that resonates for me.
For sure.
I like that. I'm I like asking questions. So, which I think is why I fell in love with philosophy, because philosophy is, as much as I like to know why and the tangibles, philosophy is really much more about the questions.
Yes.
Hopefully you get the answers, but a lot of times the answers aren't there. But it's about continuing to ask
more questions
to get closer.
We were talking about the scientific method last time too, and I think it's the spiritual mental, version of that is like, I keep asking why. I have questions, the hypothesis, and that's where we go from there, right? So
exactly, and then you'll get closer, hopefully.
Like true science and true spirituality are here, whereas commercialized paid off science versus commercialized dogmatic religion.
Yeah.
Those are your extremes. But real science and real philosophy and real spirituality is continuing to ask questions.
It's
those give you the answers. This one makes you ask questions.
Right, but the answers are not necessarily truth, capital T, objective truth.
The fact that they're given to you.
Right? And that's what people often miss about science itself. Science is a method. So that doesn't mean that objectivity doesn't exist. It doesn't mean there isn't absolute truth. I absolutely believe that there is absolute truth. I'm not always privy to it.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there isn't. 2 + 2 is 4. We know that. It doesn't matter how many times they want to tell you it's 5, or if they want to tell you that, math is racist, or whatever they want to tell you. It's just not true. The facts are the facts. If I hold up 2 here and 2 here, this makes 4. So I really had to kind of formulate what made sense to me, or at least that's the path I chose. And I realized that a lot of what I had in hindsight, a lot of what I had created was my own little religion philosophy. And it was kind of a little hybrid of existentialist philosophy, of quantum physics, of some of the religious in the sense of something greater than the here and now, whether that be a quantum energy or the universe, spirituality. But I'm definitely not somebody who is just, I'm not rooted in, I think our choices and our actions here are very important, but I do believe in interconnectivity. And I believed that when I was 9, and it really hasn't changed a whole lot. I have much more of an understanding of all the things that I hypothesized back then, and I still don't have concrete answers, but my understanding of the narrative and the belief system that I had created is deeper now. So
sure, I love that.
That's amazing.
Did that resonate with you at the time when you were in college studying philosophy? Were you thinking about your 9-year-old self, or are you only drawing that now?
Connections in hindsight, yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. I think probably partially. I was really fascinated with the existentialists even in high school. And I remember having a conversation with my mom about it. And my mom said, I don't know why you like them. Like, they're so depressing. And I said, really? I think they're so empowering.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yes. Power over our lives. I thought, that was really how I saw it. I thought, there is a lot that's out of our control, but we have a lot we have control over. We can make choices, and we can make good choices, and we can learn from our bad choices, and we can, those have consequences. And to me, that was really empowering. I think I just, so
absolutely.
And that's what I wrote. My college thesis was on existential authenticity. So
wow.
So it was connected. It's related. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I love that. I always love asking questions, or not even asking questions, because sometimes it's personal, but observing when we're letting our inner child wounds take over, or when we start addressing them and connecting the dots. You know what I mean? Because for a lot of people, it's either never or a lot later than that. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So what happens after college? Because I only know how successful and awesome you are now. I'm sure there's a lot
thank you. I'm still on my journey. We're still figuring it out.
We all are. And that never ends.
That never ends, right? And fortunately so, because how boring would it be if it did?
I know. That's the best part about this game. Just keep going.
Totally. So after college, in college, I majored in philosophy, and I really thought I was going to go on to grad school, and I was debating if I was going to go back and do a post-bac and, go back for my MD PhD, and of course get the Nobel Prize, right? Because I mean, what else would you do? Yeah, but so I was debating between that or possibly, like, I had a couple of other thoughts of, like, maybe I would go get an MBA, or I really thought or go get a law degree. I mean, I was really like, I need to go back and go to school. That was kind of hardwired in my thinking, but I needed time off first. So interestingly, after high school, my mentor for my dream research had told me that she could write me a letter of recommendation for Princeton, and that, she was pretty sure I would get in. But the only caveat was I would have to take 6 months off and either travel or work or something before I went to college. And I thought this was a great idea. And my parents said, there's no way. They were like, that is the dumbest idea ever. It's not happening. And they told me I would, and I asked why. And they said, because then you'll never go back to school. And which I actually, in hindsight, think was so bizarre, because, like, do you not know who I am at all?
Maybe they were trying to steer you away from Princeton.
Well, my dad certainly did not want me to go to Princeton.
That's what I mean. That's 5 minutes down the road. So that's where they have 3 masks on outside with their Ivy League degree, driving in the car alone with 3 masks on. That's where we're at right now.
Oh, I know. It means they've been completely indoctrinated. I'm very aware. But, I managed to escape. Although in college, I did explore a lot of that. Just to take a little tangent. So my whole life, I had kind of my beliefs were not, I was never a proponent of communism. We'll put it that way. I was never on the left. When I was in 6th grade, I created a board for school choice, and 6 years afterwards, they actually implemented it. I don't know if that was thanks to me. I'd like to think I played a small part, but I really have no idea. Right. I know. I'll pat myself on the back. I honestly have no idea, but I'd like to think I set some ball in motion. But yeah, I always was, I mean, I was on the debate team, and I was always arguing against the main, because I grew up right outside New York City. It was most people were not aligned with my views, and most of my friends were not, most of my teachers were not. I was penalized in school for it. I remember specifically getting bad grades because my teachers did not agree with my political or ideological thesis. And so when I got to college, of course, wanting to fit in and wanting to make friends, I really tried, and especially after college, I really tried I would always say I'm socially liberal, fiscally conservative, and, really trying to, and I would actually try to go left because I just wanted to fit in, and the more research and investigation I did, and the more questions I asked, the more conservative I actually became.
Yeah.
I was like, no, this doesn't make sense, and it just doesn't align with me. These are not my beliefs. And so yes, I think you're probably right. My dad was not too keen on that, but and it's probably, in hindsight, it's actually why I did not go back to school for psychology, because I was so aware of the indoctrination in the field of psychology. I love the study of psychology. I love the human psyche. I love personal development, but I like the personal responsibility component of it. And when you look at the trajectory of the DSM-1 to we're now on the DSM-5, and some of the absurdity, and you can really see where the indoctrination has been interspersed, and where the agenda is taking precedence over helping people. And to me, that's really sad. And I'm not one, the essential authenticity is what I wrote my thesis on. I'm not one of those people who is good at playing the game for the sake of playing the game.
Yep.
I wish I was better at it. I think I think I probably would have achieved more success in life sooner if I.
Success.
You're like, no.
No, it's all nonsense. Especially when you know that the game is ultimately corrupt. That's just a wanting to fit in thing, like you were saying after college.
Well,
Like
it is, and the reason I can't do it is because personal integrity is really important to me, and when I stray
me
from
too.
that, right,
You
like
feel it.
I actually get sick because it
Yep,
creates
me
so
too.
much internal unrest,
Yep.
and
I can't sleep.
I get viscerally that I can't reconcile, internally with my internal compass with what I'm doing and what I'm saying, and that causes me too much strife. So
yeah, I got to a point where I was like, I would rather everybody fucking hate me than me not be able to sleep because I didn't speak my truth.
yeah, exactly.
That helped a lot.
Or the truth is I see it. I'm not a relativist. I don't believe that there's like my
I'm not even saying I'm right. Right.
But to be aligned with, my perspective and my integrity is really important to me. So anyway, I was debating, and all I knew was that I needed the summer off. And so I started looking around at like dance and gymnastics programs for the summer in New York City. And I found this program, like a dance movement program at Stella Adler. I had always wanted to act as a kid. During my high school years, my community service work I was a director at the JCC, and I would choreograph all their dances. And so I thought, it would be really fun for me. And it was something I didn't get to do. So, so I had sent in an application. They called me down to do an audition. I was obsessed with very silly, but like I was obsessed with General Hospital, like for very like nostalgic kind of reasons. But I grew up, my mom would watch the show when I was really little, and I spent so much time in the hospital, and she did it as a way to like ingratiate herself to, the community that she didn't think really liked her. So she had to sit in these waiting rooms for a long time while I'm having surgery. And so she would watch the show, and it was during the Luke and Laura days. And so, everybody was super hyped up. I think Luke and Laura was actually the second most watched wedding in the history of television after Princess Diana. At least it used to be. I don't know if that's still true. But for years that was true. And so it was a very popular show. And so when I went to college, my mom would watch because a lot of people, and I don't think we really look alike now, but people used to say that I looked a lot like Brenda, Vanessa Marcel from General Hospital. And so my mom would watch because she said it reminded her of me. And so I would watch so we could talk about it, So I just had this tie to it. And I joined this AOL chat room who would talk about the soap operas. This was my procrastination from December. And somebody sent, one of my friends in the chat room sent me this like essay contest. And it was, to write like about your favorite love stories and who you think should, who should win the love stories, whatever. And so I wrote an essay when I was supposed to be writing a paper, and I submitted it. They called me down to do this, like it was ABC soap operas, Unforgettable Love Stories. I was on for Blink and You Miss Me. The interview was 45 minutes. I still remember it. Like the assistant kept saying, "Gary, we're losing daylight. We got to move. We got to move." And so but out of that, I got a internship at a literary agent. So I spent the summer doing that. So I was interested in the field and thought this would be fun. And so I had auditioned at Stella Adler, and they pretty much told me that it was really evident that I had zero experience. I took a monologue from Electra from one of Sartre's plays, which is, if you know anything about acting, like a really bad move, because heady material, intellectual material does not translate very well for performance. It's not emotional, visceral, like Shakespeare, when you interpret it, can be really intellectual, but it's so guttural.
Yeah.
And that translates very well on stage in front of a camera. This is very Sartre, it's philosophy, but that's what I knew. And so that's what I performed. And I'd done a lot of public speaking because I was on the debate team, and because I had to perform and defend all of my research theses. So I thought, well, this is just like getting up and you do a speech. could not be further from the truth. But what I realized about it was that it reminded me so much of a gymnastics performance or a dance performance, because you had to do so much preparation. So in that way, it's like a speech. You have to prepare and own it and mold it. But then when you're in that moment, you have to let it go and be in the moment. And you have to trust that the work is there and that the organic experience is in your cells. It's in your visceral experience. And for me, there was something about that was so terrifying and yet so invigorating. It was so exciting and made me feel so alive, because I think I spent so much time hiding behind. I love to study human nature, but I did it always from behind a book. And so this was the first time that I was forced to experience it and to study it through a visceral experience and a performance medium. And so I wanted to do it, and they said, I can see you have some talent and zero experience, and if you understand that you're going to be here with people who've been doing this since they were 3 and you're willing to work really hard, then we will take you. So I went to Stella Adler. That was my very long-winded way of saying I went to Stella Adler, and I thought it was just going to be a summer thing. I ended up continuing and deciding I wanted to be an actress and pursue that. And so that was my New York years. I started a theater company. I was a backup dancer. Yeah, those were my New York years.
That's amazing. Whoa. It just proves once again, like you said earlier, like belief and repetition.
Well, I like those two stories, how they kind of like the balance beam story. And it's like, okay, I can't do this. This is gonna be really hard. Oh, I did it. It's like, oh, I have no experience. Okay, I'm gonna work really hard, and I did it, and at a high level. That's profound.
Yeah, I love leaving just a trail of people that said you couldn't do things, even from the doctors to teachers to classmates to these people and everything. So I knew some of those things. So I came into this conversation already like excited to feel inspired by your story. But the biggest thing I'm learning and picking up is, was there a parent or a mentor or a grandparent that taught you how to be so humble? Like everything that you're saying and doing, you're really just so, you're owning it, but in the most humble way ever, which is an amazing balance for people that have achieved so much with so much adversity. Did you come up with that on your own?
I really appreciate that. I think for me, I don't feel like I've achieved that much. So it's like,
well, there you go. Thank you for proving it.
I know. And
I think that's kind of, I'm always looking at like where I want to be and like what I want to do. And so for me, I feel so behind the curve, and I feel like I've, I mean, not that I don't recognize things that I'm really grateful to have, achieved or to overcome, but, I also feel like so many things, didn't work out the way that I wanted them to. And there were a lot of failures, and, I learned a lot from them. And I believe that those things are guiding me on the path that I'm on, and, that I will reap success from them. Right. As Churchill said that, failure, success is just going from one failure to the next without loss of enthusiasm. So I'm like a master of that.
Well, that's the perfect answer, because that gives us everything as far as like, you're looking back at everything with gratitude instead of holding on to it. And you're always looking forward with positivity. So that's the lesson for people, is that attachment of holding on to regrets and inadequacy. And I should have done this. And when you should all over yourself, you just get stuck in the mud. So you're always thinking ahead.
Yeah. And then like going back to like, I guess your fundamental way of just viewing the world is asking questions. Like when you ask questions, like curiosity creates possibility. It's clear that you created possibility for yourself. Which in a lot of circumstances that you've talked about, a lot of people couldn't do that, or wouldn't have been able to do that if you didn't, have that in you, and that's.
Yeah, I love how you said that, because you were saying before, Courtney, that you're very optimistic, but you're not like, oh, you can do anything. That's like a little too much. Yeah. But if you ask a question, it gets you to the next stepping stone. And you're like, okay, we can go here. And then, okay, we'll ask a question and we'll go here and go here. So you're just not limiting your potential without saying anything outrageous.
Right. Yeah. No, it's not about limiting potential. I'm very grateful for, the experiences I've had, the lessons that I've learned. And I think gratitude is such, two things I think are in terms of mindset that are integral and essential to my thriving in life have been, a mindset of gratitude and what was the other one that I was going to say? Gratitude and hope. That's the other one. So they are kind of rooted in past and future, both of them, right? I'm not the best at being present. I'll be really honest. It's something I work at. I strive for is to really be present. I think it's part of why I love performance, because performance forces you to be in the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you really suck. So
Yeah.
it is a disaster if you are not present and in the moment. So
Right.
It's one of the reasons I love it. I love that challenge. But I think gratitude is about recognizing what you have, what you've been given. So it's both, in that moment present, but it's also a past,
Yeah.
and there is a little bit of future, gratitude, but you really don't know what you'll have in the future. We never know.
I love that. That. Instead of getting stuck in depression or anxiety, it's just gratitude and hope.
And hope is very future oriented, because hope is literally this notion of having control over your future, over something in your future. That's what propagates hope. It's this notion that, I can, there's something I can do to effectuate a result or a change in my future. And that's the genesis of hope. And I think hope is so essential, and it's paramount for any kind of moving forward in life. So
she's saying this with the American flag in the background.
It's Flag Day.
Is this the ticket right?
This is it. Oh man, if I didn't hate 99% of politics, you would be the perfect politician. Like I mean that in a compliment,
In a good way.
Not like politicians of the past,
like the antidote to.
Yes, the antidote. Thank you for how messed up 99% of politicians are. You'd be absolutely perfect because of the questioning and the fairness and the adversity and the way you speak and look.
Yeah,
and the leadership.
Really good balance of like the rational mind and the emotion and the emotional, intensity of the human experience,
perfect.
but also the logical, rational questioning of the stoic mindset or something like that.
But don't do it because you'd be assassinated immediately. So.
But politics is so. I feel like it's just. If you're not corrupt going into it, I don't know how you escape that. And if you do escape it, alive, then I don't know how do you internalize that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah,
to be so immersed in an environment that is so, I'd be so frustrated. I'm so frustrated as an outsider.
Yep.
Because I know there are people in it who really do want to do good. Yeah. Not everybody in it does it just, for ego or for, selfish. There are people who really do want to serve because they love, we'll talk about American politics or local politics. They love their community. They love their country. And they want to be a part of making it better and, to give back to our founding fathers who really did create such a genius foundation for us to build on. And they want to get back to that, and they want to be a part of continuing to restore that. And I think it must be really a very difficult world milieu to be immersed in.
Yeah, when 98% of your peers are corrupt and doing nefarious things, and you know about it, and you have good ideas and good intentions, we can't do anything about it. That would frustrate me to no end.
And you know what else I think I realized too is that in life, being, having studied existentialism and knowing that we are, as Aristotle says, like we are a summation of our actions. And so therefore our choices and our habits are,
who we are.
Yeah, make up who we are. But I think that because we always do have some sort of a circumstantial confinement. So we always have choice, but they're not always the choices we like. They're not always the ones we have, we might have to, so in some regards, there are times where we have to choose between two things we don't love so much. And in that sense, I think we always have some sort of strings. We always have things that tug on us. But when you're in politics, that certainly the higher up you go, those stakes are that much higher. Those strings get that much tighter. And so everybody has something they're answering to. And in life, we all do. But I think then it's on the public sphere. You're on the public stage. And so those strings are intensified and magnified, and the stakes are that much higher, and the ability to step outside of it becomes that much more difficult. So
Yeah, amazing. So man, if we get into philosophy and existentialism and spirituality, we won't have enough
I was about to
time.
say, like, that's I could do another, like,
I know, because we only got like 15 minutes.
and the whole dream thing too. Like, that's
Yeah.
what? I'm sorry, I missed it. What?
The whole dream analysis thing. Like, I want to go back there. Like, that was ridiculously cool.
Okay.
Like, are you like an extremely vivid dreamer still, or do you dream a lot?
It depends. I go through periods. I feel like this past year and a half, I've actually have had much more vivid dreams. I think I've had a lot of like anxiety dreams, but so I definitely have had much more vivid than I was maybe in other parts of my life. I was a lucid dreamer as a kid. Like it was almost like a movie. So the night, because you would get cut off the night before, and then I'd be like, I want to know what's going to happen. So I would literally go back and be like, I want to pick up where we left off.
Wow.
And try and dictate it. And then if I didn't like the direction it was taking, I would have to change it, so.
Cut. Let's redo that one again.
Wow. I mean, that's another nice metaphor for life of if you don't like the direction you're going in, take a pause and try to redirect. Because like you said, I like what you said before, there's always free will. Always. You always have choices and free will. But it's not unlimited choices. Sometimes it's choices that you don't want to choose from, and you do your best.
Yeah.
Wow. So wrap us up with how you got to where you are now and plug all your stuff. I feel like you have 90 different things going on.
All right. Yeah. So I moved out here. So when I was in New York and I was in, the entertainment industry, I was acting in mostly these very low budget independent films. And I had a theater company for a short period of time. And what I realized was that, with independent film, funding is very sparse. And so things were always getting cut short. They were always truncated, like just as we got started. And so they were always asking for different things. And I realized that I wanted to play. That was my whole thing, So what needs to happen so I can play? They would be like, well, there, little girl. We need these props. We need this money. We need this location. We need these actors. Like, okay, but then will I get to play? And so they said, yeah. If you can get us all that, we're, game's on. So like, okay. So I would do that. And then I realized, they're like, well, now you're a producer. Like, okay, whatever that means. So do I still get to play? I know. That was really kind of my approach. I mean, honestly, if you are not in that world because you enjoy it and you love it, I don't know what you're doing because the rest of the business kind of really sucks. So, I really wanted to at least have the playtime, but I found that I was constantly being typecast for 3 different genres, and it was very limiting. And I mostly I did better in film than I did in television, which was much more prevalent in New York at the time. And so I moved out to LA in the hopes of expanding my film repertoire. And I had met somebody, which, I'll show you that whole story, but basically the short of it was that she was doing this film about a visually and hearing impaired actress who falls in love with a movie star who had gone blind. He was like a, child actor. And so I was very passionate about this project, and she put me in touch with someone who she wanted to play, opposite me. And his manager had insisted that I help him produce it. And I got very immersed in this whole project. And it was a few years of my life that I was really involved in trying to raise the money. I learned a tremendous amount. I learned later that he was a criminal, had been in and out of jail for minor things like fraud, Ponzi scheme, embezzlement, little things. And so the money that I thought I had raised, the $3 million that I had thought I had raised, did not get transferred. And, it turned out to be a scheme, and I had been taken. But I learned a lot. He was actually really brilliant. He just was not an honest person, and I think he was really sick. But I did learn a lot, and I continued to start to produce and had done a couple of, production companies with partners. And so let's fast forward because, we want to move on with the story. But, all sorts of learning experiences and life lessons. I learned a lot about people, business, and I wasn't acting as much, here and there, but I was really focused on producing. I wanted to, at some point, my dream was really to do more of like the family values kind of genre. And I felt like the culture is really where change needs to be effectuated, and we could do that through actual entertainment, and propagate positive messaging and some, instill some values that way. So that was kind of what I was working towards. And we had a little detour as I was working on all of that. I tried out for American Ninja Warrior. So my I had a trainer. So it was one of the things that was really, I was really insistent on, was keeping that. There were times in my life where I had to cut back, for financial reasons, but I needed to have, because that, for me emotionally, it was my therapy. And so I had a trainer who, when I moved out here, kept telling me that, my whole life would just fall into place magically if I could just get enough sleep. Yeah, I know. Ironic. The dream analysis girl could not get enough sleep. But so so he told me my problem was that I couldn't shut my brain off, and I just really needed to watch some mindless reality television, and that would help me to sleep. So I was not a big TV watcher, and I definitely didn't watch reality television. But one day he comes in, he's super excited. He's like, I have it. I'm like, what is it? He's like, the perfect mindless reality television show for you to watch to fall asleep to. So you start telling me all about, American Ninja Warrior. And he's specifically telling me how there's this girl, and she's, around my size, and she's a former gymnast, and she's the first girl to, ever conquer the Warp Wall. And he's super excited about this. I'm like, oh, this sounds interesting. He's telling me how it's based on the Japanese show Saoski. And so we're in between squats, like in between sets. And he's like, I have to show you the video. He shows me the video. And I was like, okay. And I was like, that looks so fun. That's awesome. So on my drive home, I can't stop thinking about it. And I said to him, do you think it's possible that you could train me to do that? Could I try out? And he says, well, it's your weakest points. It's grip strength and speed. And I was like, well, if I was already good at it, why would I train? Why would I pay you to teach me? Like, isn't that the point of training? I was like, yeah, right. That's the idea, right? Maybe I'll get better at it.
I love how he was like, go home and watch this TV show. And she was like, I got a better idea. How about I win the fucking show?
Yeah, I don't know why he thought it would be soporific material for anybody, to be really honest. I was super amped. And then I became like an insomniac, like watching all these training videos and like watching all. Yeah. So it did not serve the purpose.
I'm sleeping less and it backfired, but we're going to win.
It totally backfired. Yeah. So I trained for it. I met the girl. It was Casey Catanzaro. I trained with her. So I trained with a bunch of them. It was super, super fun. I did not get picked to run the course, but it was the first time ever that I had shared my story on camera. And the submission video. And I had sent it, my ex-boyfriend was an editor. He made the video. And, it was such a massive file because it was a professional, size file. And so I couldn't get it to upload onto anything in less than 72 hours. Like it wouldn't render that fast. And so he told me I had a 2-hour window the next day. That's 24 hours from then. And so I didn't have 72 hours if I wanted any changes made. So he's like, send it around, get some feedback, see what you want done. And so I uploaded it to Facebook because Facebook wants to get as much material as possible. They make it really easy for you. And so it was uploaded and still took 10 minutes on Facebook to give you a sense of how big this file was. That's pretty long for Facebook. So it was 10 minutes and I made it private and I shared it with, 6 people. One of those people shared it and I got a phone call he was one of my producing partners and also my lawyer at the time, called me at 6 a.m. and said, I saw your video. And I said, yeah, I wanted your feedback. And he said, I wanted it from a cinematic perspective. And he said, no, I mean, like it's public. And he told me that, it had been shared. And I immediately started to cry. And he said, legal, you're fine. You say it's a submission video. They can't do anything. He said, the worst that can happen is they won't pick you. And he said, which I think might happen. He said, because the appeal of your story is the reveal. For some people, it's like telling the story and then seeing what they can do. He said, with your story, just from a cinematic perspective, he's like, I think the reveal is what makes it interesting. So he said, I don't know that they would find it that interesting, from a reality television perspective, if people
I disagree, but I don't know shit.
Yeah. So but I went to go take it down and I saw that already 3,000 people had seen it overnight. And, for me, that was I certainly wasn't like a name. I had never had a video. I know that he doesn't even qualify as viral, I don't think, but like that was not, to me, that was just like, I've never had that before. So I realized though back then, and I think it's different now, but you couldn't take it down if it was already public because it meant that they could just keep sharing it. So I just trusted that it was there for a reason. I was just there was gonna be some lesson I'd learn from it. Maybe it would help somebody, So I left it up, and when I didn't get picked to run the course, and I was devastated. Now, devastated. You can see I have a pull-up bar. You guys have probably seen it, but I have a pull-up bar in my apartment, and I didn't do pull-ups for 6 weeks because I needed a mourning period. Like that's how emotionally distraught I was. And when I throw myself into something, I throw myself in. That's how I am. And so I emotionally needed kind of the space. And so I took that time, gave myself that mourning period. And then I'm a very strong believer in looking at I think it's important to look at like the hard lessons that you can learn from an experience, but I think it's also like, what's a positive you can take away because that helps you to move forward. So I like to kind of ask those 2 questions. And one of the things that came back, resounding and ubiquitous was how inspired people were by my story. And so as touching as that was, I started to think, well, wouldn't it be amazing if I could because I mean, I live with me. I don't find me all that inspiring, so I was thinking, but I know like athletes with disabilities who are incredible. And I thought it would be this win-win. I was like, how rewarding and vindicating and validating for them would it be? And how inspiring for others to have this platform where, we could do this, showcase for athletes with disabilities. And, that's where so I started I had a couple of friends, and I also just started talking to whoever I could to ask them about their experience as an athlete with disabilities or challenges. And what I realized in that process was that most of them didn't move in spite of, they moved because of. And that's where I realized that, all human beings are designed to move the way that which we do is our unique creative expressions. And so that was where I came up with the concept for the show WIM, What is Movement? And I started to develop that. And that took a very long time. And, I'm just starting to release some of those. And in that process, I started to move into a world of doing like a motivational speaking and sharing my story more, because I felt like it could help somebody, and that would be rewarding for me and validating for me. So I was doing like aerial acrobatics, and I really had only started to break into. It's a really hard world to break into, like anything, takes time to build. And so I had started to dive into that, and that was kind of right before, maybe a year or two before the lockdowns happened and all of that got canceled. And yeah.
But that spawned the podcast and where we are right now.
Yep.
And here we are. This is beautiful.
Wow.
So Courtenay, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now
you know almost my whole life story.
Yeah. So that's going to inspire so many people. Like you already just alluded to, and now our audience is going to go nuts with that story. And it just that you understand the universal law of reciprocity, as far as you paid up front with your vulnerability of the story, and that helped so many people. So in the reciprocity of that should help you, just to motivate you to do more things. And I'm just honored to be your friend, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, thank you for listening and for everything you guys do. There's so much synergy, and I love what you guys do.
Thank you so much. So we would love to have you back on to just do maybe philosophy and spirituality, and just riff on like no structured story type of stuff.
Yeah, I would love it. That would be amazing. I love it.
Courtenay Turner Podcast. What else you got?
Yeah, where can they find you? And I know you have some like writing you do, and your website, and a bunch of stuff, right? So
all sorts of stuff. So
put them out there.
There is the Courtenay Turner Podcast, which is on YouTube. It's on BitChute. I'm in the process of setting up Rockfin, but it's on all the audio platforms as well: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and Podbean. So those are. You can also find it through my website, truthmatters.biz. And that is a site which I have with two others. And, our mission is to lead with the facts and be kind of a counter to like Media Matters and some of the mainstream narratives that are being put forth, and to encourage and inspire people to start doing their own research and dig for the truth and find their own perspectives based on that. So, our articles always show all of the links to all the sources that we've used so that people don't have to take our word for it. They can find it themselves. So I have many articles I've written on there, and my podcast is also linked on there as well. So, and we have a couple of other podcasts on there. We have Calling America, where we go through people from different states and how certain initiatives are affecting each state and what each state is doing about it. And what the populist consensus around it is. And we also have we will have the Ethan Hayes show that's coming on there as well. So
awesome. You're amazing. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time, guys. Peace.
Thank you.